Hi, I'm Dennis Phillips, and welcome to Everyday Reloading and Shooting. In the description below, there's a link to a video that was put out by Gavin Tube and the Ultimate Reloader, and he did what he's calling a 6.5 Creedmoor expanded 10-shot load development test with H4350 powder and 140 grain ELD match bullets. He shot 10 groups at various charge weights from 39.1 to 40.9 grains of powder. And he found velocity nodes here at 39.5, at 40.3, and 40.7, where you can increase the powder charge, but the velocity stays very constant. And at 39.5, he had a standard deviation of 5.55. At 40.3, it was 4.3, and at 40.7, it was 8.23. So what we're going to do is we're going to load 3 different bullets. We're going to load the 140 grain ELD match, the 140 grain Nosler ballistic tip hunting bullet, and the 140 grain Sierra Match King. And this is what we'll be doing. We're going to have charge weights of 39.5, 40.3, and 40.7. And we'll have that for each: the Hornady 140 ELD, the Nosler 140 ballistic tip, and the Sierra 140 Match King. I've loaded these with the Hornady Auto Charge Pro. These will all be seated at a 2.179 cartridge base to ogive, which has worked well for me for the 140 ELD. So today I set up my trimmer, and these are all at 1.91 inches or within a thousandth or two, and I've sorted these so that we have the longest cases at the bottom, then shorter, and the shorter cases at top. So we hope that will give us some consistency in the loads. All right, welcome back to the channel. Once again, we're at the Georgia Gun Club's 100-yard indoor rifle range, and today I'm expanding on the Ultimate Reloader's 10-shot load development for 6.5 Creedmoor. I've taken 3 of the charge weights where he found a velocity node at 39.5 grains, 40.3 grains, and 40.7 grains of H4350 powder, and we'll be testing 3 different bullets. We'll be shooting a 140 grain Hornady ELD match. We'll also be shooting a 140 grain Nosler boat tail and a 140 grain Sierra Match King. We'll also be measuring velocities with the Garmin Zero C1 Pro chronograph. As always, you're welcome to enjoy the music while I fast forward through my shooting, or you can skip forward to the results that follow. Shooting at 100 yards. All right, so I know I rushed that last shot, but I had one really good group here. Let's bring them in and take a look. All right, this load with the 140 Hornady ELD match at 40.7 grains, that's one that I tested before. I know that bullet, that load, and that seating depth worked perfectly before, and I think that's evidenced by this group right here. This one, this last shot, I know I rushed that one and pulled it. All right, so we will take these home, measure these with the Hornady Ballistics app, and get back to you with the results. All right, welcome back. I'm back from the range, and I've got my results. Today, we're shooting the 6.5 Creedmoor, and we're working off of Gavin Tube's 10-shot load development for 6.5 Creedmoor using a 140 grain bullet and H4350 powder. We're shooting charges at 39.5, 40.3, and 40.7 grains of powder because those were the velocity nodes within that test. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and share my thunder now. At the 40.7 grains, this is a load that I have developed and tested extensively, and this was absolutely the best group of the day. So we've got different charge weights, and they're all going to perform differently. But this one is one that I've worked on in the past. And we're at 40.7 grains, and we've got a 0.26 extreme spread. We've got all 5 shots in one ragged hole here. There's a mean radius of 0.10, which gives you an average group size of 2.0, and it covers an area of 0.04 inches. So this was at 100 yards, of course, and just very pleased with how that load has turned out. Okay, so at 39.5 grains, we have an extreme spread of 1.21 inches, a mean radius of 45, which gives you an average group size of 0.90. And we're pretty tight horizontally here, which would indicate a pretty good velocity node. So we have an area of just 0.24 inches, and we did have a standard deviation of 10. So we were very consistent on velocity with that round. We had an extreme spread of 29.7 in terms of velocity, and the average speed for those 5 shots was 2,560 feet per second. With the 140 grain Nosler ballistic tip, we had an extreme spread of 1.02, so a little bit tighter there, a mean radius of 0.35, an average group size of 0.7, and an area of 0.56. This one had a standard deviation of 8.6, an extreme spread of 25.4. We had an average speed of 2,552.6 feet per second. With the 140 Sierra Match King, we had an extreme spread of 2 inches, a mean radius of 0.68, which gives you an average group size of 1.36, and it covered an area of 1.24 inches. And that's because we had a flyer way up here at the top, seeing that number 4 there. Pretty widespread group there. Without that flyer, it would have been probably just over an inch, inch and a quarter, thereabouts. But this one had a standard deviation of 13.3, so a little less consistent on the velocity, a 37.9 extreme spread, and an average velocity of 2,545 feet per second. So at that powder charge weight, these are all 3 140 grain bullets at 39.5. For the 3 of them, we had an average velocity of 2,553, an extreme spread of 31, and a standard deviation of 10.6. So pretty good performance there, I think. Then we move up to 40.3 grains of powder, and you could feel the recoil on that rifle a little bit more at that 40.3 than you could the 39.5. You could tell these bullets were getting out there a little bit faster because now we're over 2,600 feet per second or close to it. So the ELD match at 40.3 had an extreme spread of 1.17 inches, so just over an inch barely, a mean radius of 0.5, which gives you an average group size of 1 inch, and it had an area of 0.75 inches. The Nosler ballistic tip
had an extreme spread of 0.98. So again, it's outperforming the ELD somewhat. A mean radius of 0.34 with an average group size of 0.68. And it covered an area of 0.52. So basically an area of a half an inch there for the nodular ballistic tip. It was running a velocity of 2608 with an extreme spread of only 9 feet per second and a standard deviation of 7.4. So not surprising we had a good group there. And you see 4 of these right here are really clustered together, really close with one flyer off to the side. So I think some load development and seating depth testing might be in order for this bullet. The Sierra Match King had an extreme spread of 0.90, a mean radius of 0.30, and an average group size of 0.6, covering an area of 44. So it had the best extreme spread and the best results of these 3. On that row, we had an average velocity of 2603 compared to 2553. So we're moving 50 feet per second faster with that 0.8 grain increase. We've got an extreme spread of 21 feet per second. So we're starting to tighten up as that velocity increases. It's becoming more consistent. And we had a standard deviation of 9.7 on that row at 40.3 grains. At 40.7, this was where the light was shining for me. On the 140 ELD match, this is a round that we've tested and developed extensively. We had an extreme spread of 0.26, a mean radius of 0.1, an average group size of 0.2 of an inch, and covering an area of 0.04 inches, 0.04 of an inch for that area, because that center of impact for each bullet is so close together. We had a velocity of 2,626 feet per second, an extreme spread of 20.9, and a standard deviation of 7.1. Coming back to the nodular ballistic tip at 40.7 grains, now we're traveling at 2,630 feet per second. We had an extreme spread of 1.02, a mean radius of 0.39, an average group size of 0.78, covering an area of just over a half an inch at 0.53. 2,630 feet per second in velocity, a 30 foot per second extreme spread, and a standard deviation of 11. On the Sierra Match King, it's starting to open up now. And again, even with this Sierra Match King, we did have 4 shots that are pretty tight, like within a half an inch here, and then one flyer off to the side that really blew that group apart. And so we had an extreme spread of 1.4 inches, a mean radius of 0.42, an average group size of 0.84, but it covered an area of 0.77, so just right at 3/4 of an inch in the area that it covers. It had an average velocity of 2617. It had an extreme spread of 20.1 and a standard deviation of 7.5. So this was my best row, my best load in terms of velocity, and we do have room to increase this a little bit more and take this up even. But I would have to do some more load development to find out the right seating depth for that increased load, because I'm sure that would change. But on this row, we had an average velocity of 2,625 feet per second, an extreme spread of 23.7, and a standard deviation of 8.5. Now, we only increased about 22 feet per second, going from 40.3 to 40.7, but our standard deviation is dropping because we go from 10.6 to 9.7 to 8.5. So it seems like as that charge weight is increasing, our velocity is not just increasing as well, but the extreme spread and the standard deviation is also improving as well. If you look at the performance on each of these bullets, the ELD match, if you look at the statistics on this and how they performed, the ELD match was the best performing with an average extreme spread of 0.88. And of course, this one load here is the one that pulled that average down. A mean radius of 0.35, an average group size of 0.7, and an area of 0.34. The nodular ballistic tip had an average extreme spread of 1.01 with a mean radius of 36 and an average group size of 72, covering an area of a half an inch at 0.54. And the Sierra Match King was the worst performing of these, with an extreme spread of 1.43. And I'm sure this load here is the one that threw that one off with a 2-inch extreme spread. That's certainly going to throw your average off. But an average mean radius of 0.47 and an average group size of 0.94 and an area of 0.82. So I think the winner here is pretty clear. It's obvious that it's the 140 grain ELD match at 40.7 grains. It's hard not to be pleased with a 0.26 inch group with a mean radius of 0.10 and an area covered of 0.04 inches. All right, so this is a load where I'll want to focus on. I may look at also increasing that charge weight up towards the max, since the pressure seemed okay at 40.7, but we'll have to do some more seating depth testing with that. And those are my results. I hope you find this information helpful. If you have any ideas, thoughts, comments, questions, please leave those below. I try to interact with everybody that comments. I hope you will like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.